You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place. Welcome to Arcane Carolinas. I'm your co-host, Charlie Mushaw. I do not have a wacky intro for you today.
I'm your co-host, award-winning author, Michael G. Williams. I never have a wacky intro, so
I'm going to play this one kind of dry. I'm just happy to be awake. Just happy to be here. Was that Simpsons episode where he's like, "Hi, I'm Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins," and Homer Simpson smiling politely. So today's topic was actually brought up by author Bryce Gibson of the County Line Horror Line when he came on our Case Files episode.
Yeah.
And someone, a listener, was like, what was he referring to? Everyone seemed to just roll with it like they knew the deal. I don't know the deal. Can we talk about Becky Cotton? So here we are. We're going to talk about Becky Cotton.
I think that it's so great that a listener heard something and reached out and asked, tells me they were really engaged by that interview. They wanted to learn more. I am so delighted. That's so great.
Yeah. So shout out to Mr. Gibson. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's exactly why we were doing those types of things. We want to create a community where people exchange ideas and stuff like that and learn about things. So anyway, Becky Cotton, sometimes referred to as the Devil in Petticoats, is a story out of Edgefield, South Carolina. And this one borders on true crime, which is not really a genre we do. But there is a smidge of supernatural stuff in there and a lot of legend kind of piled on. So I think we can cover this.
Yeah.
All right. Murder. I'm going to talk about murder. As always, we'll start with the location and the history of the location. Edgefield, South Carolina. Considered part of the South Carolina backcountry, it's near the Georgia line in Edgefield County. And the history of Edgefield is remarkably well preserved. They have a really cool county historical society that has lots of interesting articles and facts. There's a website, I think it's called like Discover Edgefield or something, in addition to the historical society. Like they're very about preserving the history of the county and the town. Before the first arrival of European explorers, which they attribute to be 1520, Native American tribes had been there for thousands of years prior. And there are at least 29 different documented tribes for that region.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously, some are more prominent than others. The most prominent were Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Savannah, and if I say this wrong, I apologize, Yuchi or Yuki, Y-U-C-H-I.
I believe it's pronounced Yuchi, but I don't know.
Those were the more prominent tribes in the area. And at some point in the year 1540, Hernando de Soto, famous Spanish explorer, passed through.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, he didn't really do anything there, but, you know.
But I would imagine that's a part of the Spanish exploration of the southeastern region that we've talked about in the previous episodes that, you know, showed up around what's now Hickory, North Carolina and into Tennessee, all of which was something I did not know even happened until we started doing this show. I had no idea that Spanish explorers had been in the Carolinas at any point.
So he rolled through and was just like, exploring, didn't set up a camp or anything, just came through, and it was documented. Settlement by Europeans didn't really start in earnest in Edgefield County or Edgefield, the town. We'll talk about them sort of one and the same for the sake of this era, because there was no law. Are
you suggesting there weren't clearly demarcated boundaries between town and county and things like that?
Right. It is widely described, this region, as a pristine wilderness, remote area in which people lived subsistence lives, in which they ate what they farmed, and it is what it is. And it was a beautiful place to live. European settlers started showing up around 1750, coming down from the north via the Great Wagon Road, which was a migration path. And even with this influx, Edgefield had no courts. That's going to be important later. No formal law and order. Yeah. No formal law and order until around the 1760s. It was really just people hanging out and living their best life.
It was the frontier.
Yes. And then the Revolutionary War kicked off, and it got nuts. Apparently, people in what we would now refer to as Edgefield County used the Revolutionary conflict as a way to settle personal scores with neighbors and relatives.
I didn't grow up there, obviously, but that's a big mood where I did grow up. So, yeah, I believe that.
So depending on your attitude towards someone else, it's kind of like picking a sports team, right? Like, I don't like that guy, so I don't like his team. And they would flip-flop between, I support the colonies. And then be like, oh, Bill down the street, he supports the crown. Yeah, well, Bill's a jerk. So that's why I support the colonies. And sorry, I got that backwards. He does support the colony for the queen, or for the king. You just change. Like,
It's
there
just
was
like
a lot of you.
It feels very contemporary in some ways. I don't know.
They would just capitalize on whatever opportunity to go either start a fight or kill somebody they didn't like.
Yeah.
When General Harry Lee III, later governor of Virginia and member of the House of U.S. Representatives and father of Robert E. Lee, wrote about the revolution in the area, he stated, "In no part of the South was the war fought with such asperity as in this quarter. It often sank into barbarity."
I'm not sure had this been the place where I grew up, I'm not sure that it ever would have risen out of it in the first place.
They like to fight. Violence is a way of life at this time in this area.
They're scrappers, is what you're saying.
Yes. Following the revolution, the United States exists. And they're like, okay, well, we have to have a government. We have to have local government. We're beginning to establish law and order as a country. So in 1785, they waited a couple of years. The boundaries of Edgefield County were established and a courthouse site was designated. They were like, we're building a courthouse.
Good on them.
Also important. That courthouse is going to come back.
Okay.
So things start to settle down. There were some experiments with planting tobacco as a cash crop, but they found that cotton took to the soil more. So it became like a cotton area. Another big economic staple that emerged from Edgefield was the first successful commercial production of stoneware in the Southeast. So pottery.
Yeah.
So they became renowned for their pottery and their cotton. This, of course, led to a massive influx of slave labor. Lots of slaves in the area, which then leads to a massive influx of cash and prosperity for the people that own the slaves.
Right.
So things begin building up. It's really, for lack of a better description, everything that I could find is like the Hollywood portrayal of the Deep South in the antebellum period.
I was going to say, in a lot of ways, this is sounding like sort of the perfect example of the economic disparity inherent in the Deep South before the Civil War and after the Civil War. But that notion of there basically being a landed gentry own not just all the land and all of the means of production, but also all the people doing the production.
Yes. And all of this plays into the history of Edgefield. The history of Edgefield is actually really interesting when you get into the ebbs and flows and rises and falls of how it goes. We're already moving past the era of when our story takes place, but I want to give context to the history of Edgefield because it will play into this. You've got all these people making this money, sitting around, being rich, dabbling in law and studying. Young men of Edgefield are going off to university and coming back, and there's a lot of prestige and sense of honor and overdeveloped confidence, possibly unearned aristocratic worldview.
People born to privilege who think that means that they deserve it.
Yeah. So you've got a lot of that going on. And I already talked about the culture in Edgefield before law and order was sort of established. So one of the things that was preserved was a widespread devotion to the duel code.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yes. So duels were a thing.
Yeah.
So you had these young men that would return to their extremely wealthy lives, having gone off and learned about the ways of the world, that would then be taken aback by some misdeed or perceived wrongdoing, and I demand satisfaction. Duels would ensue. And apparently, like, it was really bad. And like some of the best and brightest of Edgefield were lost due to the constant dueling, and like violence was just accepted. And this is from what I read. All the prosperity for this one particular class led to the sense of invincibility.
Tell me if I'm wrong when I picture the following. A bunch of people who passed the Revolutionary War picking off their neighbors over things other than the Revolutionary War, but saying that that's what it was about, had a bunch of kids who then were rich enough to pay somebody to make the sign that said Esquire and started calling themselves lawyers. And then when they didn't get something they wanted, said, well, that has besmirched my honor. But because we're not actually good at being civilized people, we're just going to kill each other over it.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
That is it. It's like the Historical Society of Edgefield acknowledges this part of the culture at the time. Just, it's a part of their history where they're a big duel in town.
If I look back on my high school experience and I think of the rich kid who was also a jock, who generally started conversations by saying, what you looking at? They are the direct cultural descendant of these people.
Perfect analogy. And then the Civil War comes. Civil War breaks out. So, you know, the antebellum period is interrupted, obviously, by the Civil War. The majority of Edgefieldians joined the effort on the part of the South. They considered themselves like a gateway to the history of the South, defining the culture of the South. Majority of men in the town and the county join the effort, go off. A lot of them don't come back. The conflict never actually reaches Edgefield. The closest it got was Aiken. Sherman did not come through. I read a quote that people of the time said that he was afraid to come to Edgefield.
I somehow doubt that. I don't know. The guy took on Atlanta.
They lost a lot of people and it hurt, right? So then, because when Reconstruction starts, you not only have the adjusting to the new economic model, but you also have a large amount of your population is dead and gone.
Yeah.
So Reconstruction was really rough. Particularly the first 10 years. In response to that, there was a proliferation of Jim Crow attitude that then persisted for a really long time. And again, this is all acknowledged in the Historical Society in the town of Edgefield and stuff, you know, and it's, I'm not belittling the people, you know, I just because I don't agree with them, I'm not slandering them right now. I'm just telling the history.
Well, and the people who live here now were not the people who lived there then. You know?
Right. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. I don't know. I mean, like Strom Thurmond was born and died in Edgefield.
Oh, that says a lot, potentially. Not that everybody...
So I jumped a couple decades there, but I'm trying to explain that, like, the attitudes that came out of Reconstruction then persisted into what we would call like contemporary times. But since then, Edgefield has taken on a different tone. Okay, so back to the 1880s. The wheels are coming off the cotton trade. Profit margins shrink. The new economic model just does not support the lifestyle that the plantation owners had grown accustomed to. This changed during World War I a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make pants.
Yeah.
So, among other things. So cotton prices were rebounding and things were looking up. And then the boll weevil hit.
Oh.
Followed by the Great Depression.
Gosh.
So, like, they were just getting pounded by circumstance for many decades. And I'm sympathetic to the people that were trying to make their way, like the simple, common people. I got my couple of acres and I'm just trying to make it. Dang. It's not a unique tale for the region, but it's worth acknowledging the struggle, I think.
Oh, totally. It's easy to point at the plantation owner and say, well, that person was clearly kind of a jerk, to put it exceptionally mildly. I'm putting it that mildly so that I don't have to bleep myself later. It's easy to forget a lot of people who are just trying to get by and probably, I mean, like you described them yourself as subsistence farmers originally. These are people who are only going to do as well as they themselves are able to achieve with their exceptionally limited resources. It's also interesting to me, though, that you mentioned World War I, because I was thinking when you were talking about the impact that the loss of life in the Civil War had on the area economically, it was making me think about the sort of economic fallout of things like, well, like the 30 Years' War, which we talked about in the origins of the Moravian Church. World War I was actually the first thing that came to mind, where it was an exceptionally difficult process for a lot of places to recover from World War I because they literally had lost their workforce.
Right. Wars are so different now for us as United States citizens that it's difficult to conceive of the challenges that must have arisen on the home front during these times.
Gosh, very different now. It's unthinkably different.
It still has a terribly negative impact on people's lives. However, it used to be worse, I guess.
Most of us experience it as something that we see on the news, and then we change the channel.
The conflicts that we're talking about were like the whole country was in it.
I think it's easy for the average modern day U.S. citizen to not even really be aware of what that experience is like, to not just not be aware, but never even begin to wonder what that experience is like. And these were times, and this was a place when that experience was very upfront and personal for everyone.
So post-Great Depression, Edgefield has emerged as a great place for tourism of Southern historical sites. Mm-hmm. Lots of cool old pottery kilns. They have a town square that looks like it's from Back to the Future. It's like the most picturesque town square you've ever seen. It looks like a movie set.
Wow. Okay. I've got to go look up pictures. Yeah.
It's really neat. Well, I'll throw some pictures on the Facebook page in an album. As far as businesses go, because we always try to plug some local businesses, I very selfishly would like to visit the Carolina Moon Distillery. They make spirits.
Yeah. What variety of spirits do they make?
Many. They're not locked in. It's just sort of like your catch-all distillery.
Sounds great.
There was a kiln that looked pretty neat called the Groundhog Kiln, and then another one called the Phoenix Factory's Old Edgefield Pottery.
Oh,
yeah. Apparently Edgefield pottery is like a big collectible item. And so there's a couple of kilns that keep this tradition going. It's been alive for several hundred years at this point. Now you have a little bit of insight into the historical context and culture of Edgefield. And we are going to talk about Becky Cotton. There are a lot of different versions of this story out there. And some of them are real just not researched well and like get the name of the town wrong and add in stuff. So I'm going to start with like an aggregate of the most aggrandized version.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the craziest version.
Yeah.
Also, she was a real person. Like, it's not up for debate that this woman did not exist. She was a real person.
Yeah.
The most aggrandized version goes, she lives in the town of Edgefield, and her father was seeking refuge with her and her husband from 3 men for an unknown reason. There was some sort of dispute. He had besmirched the honor of these 3 gentlemen.
Right.
And had fled to his daughter's house. Hide me. Men come to the house. Husband says, yeah, he's right there. They come in.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. I love it.
They come in. She's like, no. They kill him on the spot. So she's so mad that she waits till he goes to sleep, gets an axe and kills him.
Okay.
And then has her brother, David, help her hide the body in a part of what was at the time Beaver Dam Creek. Now it's a part of Slade Lake. It says, like, they killed Dad. I got the revenge, though. Help me hide the body. And the brother's like, oh, okay. So they weigh the body down with bricks. They like wrap it up in like canvas with bricks and stuff and like take it and dump it in this particularly deep part, like a hole in the creek, which is again now part of Slade Lake. So husband 1 disappears. A fellow named Erasmus Smith takes an interest in her. They are married. Kills him with a knitting needle through the heart for reasons unknown.
Gosh.
Dumps the body in the same hole.
She's going to fill that hole up.
So husband number 2 disappears. And I want to pause that she was, in all accounts, she is described as strikingly beautiful in physical appearance and absolutely charming in demeanor.
Interesting. I like her style so far.
Really?
Okay. Let me explain that. Knitting needle through the heart is not something you plan. That is a response to something. That is a spontaneous act. He must have done something to make her real mad.
Brought up husband number 1, probably.
Probably asked around about husband number 1.
Heard you been asking some questions, Erasmus. Yeah, I was just, you never mentioned it. I figured y'all were married. I was just asking some people in town with this. Right in the heart.
Yeah. Hey, you never know. Let people's past be the past.
So Erasmus is in the hole next to husband number 1. Then she marries a guy named Joshua Terry, who she poisons to death. And then she puts the body in the hole.
Ooh.
So the hole's kind of full. And somebody walking along the creek sees a body kind of float up.
Ugh.
And a quick investigation reveals that, hey, these are all Becky's husbands.
Maybe they all were really into deep creek diving and they needed bricks to hold them down there. And then they all had accidents.
I stubbed my toe and stuff like that. I mean, there's such a thing as accident prone husbands. He's just clumsy. Tripped and fell and landed on this needle.
Yeah. Fell on the needle 14 times.
landed on this bottle of poison with my mouth.
Never should have stored my poison in my soup cabinet. Oh, well.
She's charged with murder. She's arrested. She's charged. Decides to defend herself, testified in her own defense at the trial, which is not something that people generally do because it's really easy to self-incriminate. Or, if you give the wrong vibe to a jury, like there could be a jury member that's like, I don't like your hair. You know what I mean? And then
yeah,
you don't want to taint the jury. She said, I'm Becky Cotton and I am absolutely delightful and I am testifying. So she gets up on the stand. It's an all-male jury. She's beautiful. She's charming, and through a combination of crocodile tears and these other attributes, she is acquitted by the jury and the case is dismissed.
Big serial mom vibes. Love it.
Soon afterwards, one of the jurors was so taken by her that he proposed and they were married.
Oh my God.
With other members of the jury attending the ceremony. So a whole little community sprang up around her.
Wow. Okay.
A little bit of time goes by, seeing what a monster his sister had become, allegedly racked with guilt from his participation in what he thought was a justified killing on the first one. The brother is in distress and sees her in the town square on the steps of that courthouse, flirting with a significantly younger man. And there will be no loss of life on his watch. No innocent life. He grabs a rock, runs over, bashes her head in, jumps on a horse. Yes, this is her brother. Bashes her head in, leaves her to die on the steps of the courthouse, jumps on a horse, and rides off in the sunset.
I am rendered speechless. None of this just like he runs up and points at her and says, j'accuse or anything like that. He just hits her in the head with a rock and rides out of town.
Yep, and she died. So we killed her on the steps of the courthouse.
Dang.
And the spot, this is where it gets a little spooky. Okay, so it was terrible before, and now it's getting spooky.
I mean, I was pretty on board with her until the poison, because poison is premeditated, and that's clearly probably not okay. I mean, depending on the guy, I don't know. But I do kind of find it charming that she's like, hey, I'm going to convince this jury, and I'm going to marry one of them. That's how hard I'm going to convince all of them.
Then I'm going to kill him. I mean, show him my swimming spot.
I mean, at that point, the hole's empty again, right? So why not?
Oh, yeah. So the spot where the hole, it began being referred to in Edgefield as Beck's Hole, kind of like Teach's Hole in the Outer Banks. And it said that this is a current legend. It said that, her spirit walks the shoreline and that you can hear the wailing of her victims rising up from the water.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
I just imagine like bubble, 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 like bubbles. I understand, it's likely meant to be more clear than So the bulk of this account that I just gave with the multiple husbands and the everything comes from an 1810 pamphlet by the Reverend Mason Locke Weems, sometimes referred to as M.L. Weems, sometimes referred to as Parson Weems. This pamphlet was titled The Bad Wife's Looking Glass, or God's Revenge Against Cruelty to Husbands.
Okay. Did you say 1810?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to take issue with the idea that God ran up on the steps of the courthouse and hit her in the head with a rock.
Yeah, I don't think it was him.
It's pretty Old Testament. I don't know.
The story again appears, same author, 1816 book. So the story grows from a pamphlet to a book. The Devil in Petticoats, or God's Revenge Against Husband Killing. So apparently husband killing was a real problem to the point where you got to write a book about it.
I mean, I've never met any 19th century husbands, but I'm betting a lot of them were not very nice.
Here's where it starts to get a little sticky on some of this stuff, is that this is the same guy that created the George Washington cherry tree story for Life of Washington.
Way.
Yeah, it's the same guy. And coincidentally, it's a nice story, but it's a known myth. I cannot tell a lie. That actually didn't appear in Life of Washington until the 5th edition of that book in 1806.
You know who this reminds me of? This reminds me of the guy who wrote the Cora tree story.
Yeah, Chuckles Webby. Got to go back to that well. Add some more flavor. No, you really don't. You really don't.
Kind of like Becky with that hole.
Yeah. Don't go back. Don't go back. Let the story be. So naysayers. So that's the big legend. And there are, of course, naysayers to details on that. In 1951, the September 9th edition of the Greenville News, Manuel J. Rogers collaborated with the research of someone named Miss Hortense Woodson, and they were able to determine through court records that Becky Cotton existed. She was a real person. Like, that's not up for debate. And she did have a brother that was charged at one point with assault and battery in the town of Edgefield.
Okay.
That brother's name was not David. And there was no murder trial on record for her, but there were civil trials in her name on record.
Oh.
And given what we know about Edgefield at the time and the cavalier attitude towards, the law and those in positions of power, I'm still on board for there being some murder, because an outright dismissal and acquittal of a case, and then she marries one of the jurors, like an expungement could very well have resulted in the destruction of physical records.
For that matter, you don't even need the expungement, frankly. A lot of legal documents, courthouse records, all kinds of stuff like that from the early 19th century is gone, lost to us just through simple decay, but also through a lot of like fires and things like that. A lot of municipalities, a lot of county governments would do things like store all court documents in the same building, and it would turn out to be this like wooden shack, and it burns down in a lightning storm 50 years later, and all of a sudden nobody can prove who owns anything.
And we ran into that with the Devil and Hezekiah Jones, where there was a hurricane that came through and destroyed a bunch of court records and land records. So there was a gap in the reporting where we had a block before and a block after, and then there was this little block where we couldn't find that one marriage record. Anyway, I'm not out on the murder yet. And based on the Historical Society, existing court records, other people's research, I will share with you my truth on the legend of Becky Cotton.
Oh, please do.
Because here's what pretty widely is accepted as fact through those channels: court records, historical researchers, and the County Historical Society, which, again, their website's pretty good. Rebecca Kennedy was born in 1765, the only daughter of James Kennedy. Her mother died when she was very young, and she became very attached to her father. In 1785, Rebecca, now going by Becky, marries John Cotton. The dispute was over land, which in the post-revolutionary era would have likely been an issue given all the conflicts that we had read about. And as we know about their dedication to the duel, this is around the time that money is really starting to become a thing in Edgefield, right? Mm-hmm. Revolution's over. They've settled. They've established a government. They figured out that cotton is the ideal crop. They're not planting tobacco. They're planting cotton. Money's coming in. There's a dispute over land. Land is power. I buy that there could be a dispute over land. So Becky's dad goes to his son-in-law's house to seek refuge and says, hey, you got to put me up. These guys are after me. The men did not knock on the door and politely ask the husband. Instead, they kicked the door in and shot him on sight. Yeah,
I would expect that would be more the way it would go.
And this was accepted as, a justified killing for the time. Mm-hmm. That's why all the murder in the preamble mattered. Yeah. Because the murder in the middle needed to be contextualized. So this is accepted by locals. Becky is pissed. She did not immediately kill John. She waited until 1794 and then put an axe in his head while he slept.
Wow. That is not about her father.
So then she calls her brother, David, and says, hey, I need you to help me with this body. And he's like, they stuck it in the potato vault of the home. And she immediately went on the run.
Interesting.
David's just like, in the potato vault. Like, where's John? Where are any of them? Hey, have you seen your sister? Well, she killed John. He's in the potato vault. So they're like, oh, thanks. We should probably go catch her. He's like, yeah. So they're off. There's a big hunt. And they actually find her pretty far away in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains at Kings Mountain.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty far away.
She gets brought back for trial, but her bewitching beauty captivates the all-male jury, and she was acquitted of all charges. After which she becomes the administrator of the dead husband's estate and engages in legal battles with her father-in-law, Thomas Cotton, which coincidentally aligns with the civil trial records.
Oh.
This is all lining up to yes, Becky Cotton existed. Yes, she put an axe through this guy's head. There was a trial. She got off. There was some money issues, and money leaves a paper trail, more so than murder in Edgefield, South Carolina. And she did marry again. She married one of the jurors, but it was not any of the names that appeared in Cherry Tree Guy's pamphlet or book. It was actually a guy named Major Ellis.
Okay.
And then on May 5th, 1807, Becky went to town.
Literally or metaphorically?
Yes. So Becky goes to town, and she's standing on the steps of the courthouse, flirting with a much younger man. And it was her brother, Stephen, who saw her and hated her for what she had gotten away with. And he bashed in her head with a rock and she died.
Gosh. So that part's true.
Yeah. He was not charged with murder. This lines up with the assault and battery charge. He adopted her children and he moved west. His grave is in Mississippi. It exists. Both the Cotton and Kennedy descendants have worked together to research their family history in Edgefield and contributed documentation to the preservation of the history, worked with the Historical Society, and no one can confirm the location of her grave.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's kind of like the Devil in Hezekiah Jones, where like there really was a Hezekiah Jones. Like there really was a Becky Cotton. And she really did kill this dude and get away with it and really was murdered on the steps of the courthouse. I'm
really surprised that this is a case where the actual meat and bones of the story are pretty accurate.
Yeah.
There's some embroidery, obviously, you know, and there's some like adding a little fringe on the edge, but largely the legend is accurate.
Yeah. The whole thing with Beck's Hole and Slade Lake and all that doesn't match up with the historical record.
Sure.
But the true crime part of it does. So that's why I said at the beginning, I was like, it's true crime. It's got a little bit of ghost. It's a weird mix that we haven't really explored before. We generally steer away from true crime out of sensitivity to like, these are real people. But I decided that, 1800 was far enough back that this was okay.
Yeah. I mean, like we've talked about before, it's hard to do a crime story that does not glorify the crime. In the same way that it's hard to make a war movie that doesn't glorify war. It's fine for other people to do. It's just not our specialty.
Some other people do it really well.
Oh, yeah.
True Crime Buzz. What's up?
Right. Exactly. They're super good at this stuff. It's just not my specialty.
So where did the extra stuff come from? We know the cherry tree guy put it in there, but we also know that we're going back a very long time now and stories evolve. So like, yeah, he might have put a little bit of extra stuff on there, but not all of it, right? So a couple decades after Becky, there's a serial killer in England named Mary Cotton.
Okay.
And she absolutely 100% had at least 4 husbands that she killed. It's speculated that she also killed 2 lovers, but that's not confirmed. So news travels slow and weird. And like, I suspect that a combination of local flavor got mixed in with somebody hearing the same surname and mistook it for being the same person. And it just grew and grew and grew.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, that's the sort of organic way that stories tend to merge together when they're similar enough.
And if you want to get weird, I'm going to steal your shtick here because I know you like
please go for it.
You like to get weird with it. What if Mary Cotton was just Becky Cotton reincarnated?
I love that idea.
So that's it. That's the Devil in Petticoats, the legend of Becky Cotton. Bex went to town in more ways than one. So that's all I had for today. Really looking forward to sharing this with folks. We are going to be at Carolinas June 4th through the 6th, 2021. That's in Charlotte. We'll be masked up and socially distanced and bringing our antics. If you're interested in that, please come check us out. We have some really cool stuff planned coming up. We would really appreciate it if you left us a review on Apple Podcast or whatever podcast platform you use. Give us a rating, give us a review, drop us a line, arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. We'll have a new issue of the zine out in June with some really cool pack-in stuff that I'm very excited about. What am I missing here? Oh, new t-shirts. We got new t-shirts.
Yeah, new t-shirts.
I drew a picture of a bat.
The bat picture is phenomenal.
People really like the bat. T-shirts and koozies, new for the summer. Woo!
Get your bat on in the summer. I don't know. Sun's out. Bats out. I don't know. I don't have anything for that.
Sun's out, bats out. That makes no sense. Moon's out, bats out. It's a nighttime shirt.
No idea what I'm trying to go for there.
Speaking of moons, we're going to do the Moon-Eyed People.
Yes.
I think next.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I've done some of the initial research for that, and it's really fascinating reading. There's a lot going on with that culturally in early American culture. A very interesting topic, and I hope I don't make a lot of people mad. Fingers crossed. Only good intentions.
And we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, and we'll see you at Carolinas if you're there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Drop us a line if you're going.
Yeah, please.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thanks for joining us. If you liked it, give us a rating, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, send us an email and tell us why. If you're not wrong, we'll try to fix it.
And if you're interested in award-winning speculative fiction, including science fiction, urban fantasy, and horror, find me, Michael G. Williams, at www.michaelgwilliamsbooks.com and check out Falstaff Books at falstaffbooks.com.
If you'd like to pick up some Arcane Carolinas merch, look at behind-the-scenes info, pictures, videos, stuff like that, all the things that get cut, check out arcanecarolinas.com, where you can get access to our Patreon, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, all that in one place, including the merch store. Buy a shirt.
Clothe your body.
Drape your body in our wares.
Be our living billboards. You're covering this topic, right?
Yeah, that would be horrible if I hadn't.
I can't remember what we're doing today, so I was just like...